It's May 10, 2000, and I'm talking to Joe Wilson.
Tape with Joe introduced. What have I figured out?
Well, people come down to the end of their workaday life and wonder what it is they should have been doing, what it is that they needed to be doing, what was it that really mattered, and going to the office and reading books and the confusion between those things. You try to make your job what you're interested in life. You try to get these things in sync, and people hate their jobs. Many of them do. The majority of people are alienated in some way from their work, and so it's okay to recognize that that's the situation. It's okay to deal with it in any kind of positive way that you can. Hell, it's okay to deal with it in a negative way. The one thing you ought not to do is just to sit there and take it.
Well, that is true. That is what I did. Now, if you could tell my wife that. You see, my wife, I had a face. As you might understand, I moved to Texas when I was 41, and as I say, I'd been practicing law, it was exactly 14 and a half years when I left my law firm. And I faced a lot of midlife crisis jokes, and I hated those jokes, but I know that they go with the territory, and my wife's joke was, I told him to buy a sports car, and he wanted to go to the goddamn university, so...
That's I came here from a good job in New York. I had as good a job as a hillbilly from my county ever had. You know, I was working on Madison Avenue, making more money than I would relatively than I'll ever make again. And I was glad to come down here and not do that anymore.
You from Tennessee or Virginia?
I'm from northeastern Tennessee.
Okay. What were you doing on Madison Avenue?
I was working for a consulting firm. They had a public relations and advertising and a fundraising arms, a little mini conglomerate, kind of thing you can really get to hating if you do it for a while.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I've not missed it since I left. You know, I realized I'm 62. I could have retired several years ago if I'd be dead now.
Well, that's the way I feel. I was back in San Francisco just a few months ago. It was a short trip, and I went in there specifically to have a reunion with an old college friend. He had to be there on business, and we'd all lived there at one time, although none of us do now. And he said, you know, it's our old stomping grounds. I got to come in for a few days. I haven't seen you in 5 years. Can you fly in? So I did it, and it was fun. But I had lunch with some of my old partners on the first day while I was waiting for my friend to arrive, and they're all, I'd be dead, or I would have had a massive coronary, because I took it, I was good, you know, I took it very seriously, and it would have killed me. Anyway, you know, as I say, I'm concerned about your timing, but I'd like to know, I don't want to describe what you do now with the NCTA. I'll let you do that. I have some sense of what the NCTA does, but I'm going to leave it to you in terms of description. But what connection do you see between the kind of work you do there and if any connection, and things like commercial record companies do of the sense of the nature of our Hooli or Rounder, and then also in another sphere, things like the Folk Alliance does, which calls itself a folkloric organization but traffics heavily and all sorts of things that really skirts the issues. I mean, do you see some linkage between the record companies, the Folk Alliance, the NCTA, and Joe Wilson, or are you guys working at cross purposes or in different tracks?
Well, we share some interest and we share some passions, and I'm slowly figuring out who I am and what I do.
Yeah.
It's taken a long time. Of the things you mentioned, the one is not you mentioned some apples there, but you also had a kumquat in there.
Okay.
Or maybe a peach. Our Hooley Records is the passion of Chris Strockwitz.
Right.
And it's driven by what Chris loves and believes in, and it deals with things that come from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a corporation, and yeah, there's a foundation there, but it's an extension of Chris and his coming to deal with a world that was very confused for a kid coming here from Germany as a refugee, and hearing all of these good and wonderful things and becoming an advocate of these things, and making a record when he was teaching mathematics at Berkeley High School, and making 300 records of Mance Lipscomb and pasting the sides on and selling them and making enough money to make another one. He didn't intend to go into the record business. He was showing something that he loved and it was important to him. So, is that a record company? Well, if so, it's a very special record company. Rounder has some people, the founders I know and knew from the beginning, and yeah, they care about these kinds of things, but I don't think they care about them in the same ways that Chris does. They like the music, but they're also running a record company. It's hard for me to think of our Hooley as a record company.
Uh-huh.
Now, as for Folk Alliance, I think whatever you are is all right, as long as you can deal with what you are. You can come to terms with that. And you're perfectly right in that tradition, as seen from a Folk Alliance perspective, doesn't have much deep tradition in it. It's mainly people who have learned styles and things and are reproducing those kinds of things, and I think that's okay. You get into the if you're raised out in the mainstream and it's a little bit polluted and it's a little bit, and you hear something from a crystal spring somewhere and you want to get closer to that, it's okay to wiggle in that direction. But it's not the same as the deeper thing, the thing that comes from the working folks with the sweat on them and all of it. It's not exactly the same. I come from far enough up the creek to where I recognize that, and though the people, marketing defines a lot of this. The people who are skilled at marketing are the people you hear of. They're the people who make the money because that's their purpose. And God bless them, fine for them. They can go into business and do whatever they want to do, but they don't necessarily need my hillbilly ass to help them. Mm-hmm. You know, there's some other folks that I'm interested in, and I've had to sort out my work. When I came here, we were doing National Folk Festival, an event that started in 1933, an event that had been a mixed bag of things, a kind of a dress-up version of but lots of real things too. It was the only show in town for a long time, and I came along with just after the great folk scare of the 60s, and the folk scare of the 60s worked a couple of ways. There were those people who took off from the Kingston Trio and went over to the New Lost City Ramblers. They went up that particular branch. And for most of them, that's as far as they got. They may have learned that the Ramblers got their music from Wade Maynor and people like him, but they couldn't socially connect to Steve Ledford and Wade Maynor. So they could socially connect to the social thing of performance is really important, because what people like to see on stage is themselves as they would like to be. And while Maynor may be the superior musician, he's also a hick, you know. So you have to, God bless him, he's a wonderful hick too. But there's some social bridges there that some of those folks haven't crossed. That's all right, no problem. They're not the world of this. So there's a bigger world out there where Maynard comes from and where all of this emanates from, and I've tried in some odd ways to deal with that. And while doing festivals and tours and events and so forth, where I've actually found myself wandering into is public policy matters here. Archie did some of that. He was here for a couple of years, walking up and down the halls over here and over here, and he did good work. God bless him. He did fine work. And I was even then coming down here from New York occasionally and walking around with him. I worked for a United States Senator many years ago on a campaign staff, Senator Kefauver from Tennessee, when I was a baby. Yeah. That's become really important work for me. Now, the other side of the folk scare were the folks who became academic folklorists, and they went off doing their things. They tend to denigrate the folkies, but actually, you know, they're peas from the same pod. They're identical. If you can turn them over and look at them in every orifice, and it's the same beast. I swear to God, there's not one iota of difference, except a kind of a slight disdain for each other. It's the disdain that the junior has for the sophomore. And when it came to public policy things here in Washington, I at first, dealing with policy things, there was attempts to lobby here for years. I got into some of the advocacy things. Now suddenly I realized that the people that I was working with, whether folkies or folklorists, didn't really understand how this place worked. They didn't care how it worked. They had this odd, simplistic idea that a lobbyist is some kind of oily dork that you pay a scandalous fee, and he goes around and greases everything, and something happens for you.
Right.
And it's an odd thing in this world of buying and selling. If you go out and start looking for an oily dork, you'll probably find one, and he'll take your money and so forth and so on. I tried working with some of those concepts and some of those people for a while, and then a few years ago I just says, oh, the hell with all of you guys, kiss my tootie. I'll do what I feel ought to be done here, and I'll work on that. Whatever portfolio I have can come from the organization that I work for and the shows we do and the friends we make.
You still got to raise money, I gather. You can't put it on without that.
Well, yeah, we get money from, we've got a Department of Interior cooperative agreement. We've got private funding from Lila Wallace Reader's Digest Foundation, lots of private sources. Sell tickets to a lot of the things we do. I mean, it isn't hard to make a living in these prosperous times. Sure, hell, I'm from the Appalachian Mountains, and it was, I would have been considered a roaring success if I just got to be an over-the-road truck driver, you know. So nobody, I'm coasting. But these are dealing with policy matters. This morning I've been talking to some people about the need for a preservation fund, and a preservation fund that we try to get put at the Humanities Endowment. The head of the Humanities Endowment is Bill Ferris, who's a folklorist, and Bill Ferris doesn't know I'm doing this. He can find out whenever he finds out. and he'll probably be all right. He'll be very pleased. And if it doesn't work, he hasn't been bothered.
Right.
But we get to talk to the minority leader in the Senate today, and 2 or 3 other senators. It's not much money as money goes here, and that I know about it, problem. And that building right there is full of it. If you go down the stacks here, you smell vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sound. That's the smell of sound turning to dust. There's a real need to deal with these collections that folklorists and others worked so hard to make in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And last year I got talked to some people who were dealing with the House appropriations thing. They put a directive in the language for the Humanities Endowment to deal with that problem, to do an analysis. And Ferris did that. He's got Peggy Bulger here putting together a meeting of the Federal Archive people. So they're doing it the right way, and he's the right guy. And there's no and it's really complicated who the constituency is for this work. It's because the collections are not just the collections here. It's not the collection at the University of Texas or Indiana. It's all those records made back in the 20s and 30s, all of that, all this treasury of stuff, lots of it locked up in a way, not in archives here, but in record company archives. We need some legislation which says to record companies, either keep it in print or it can be issued whether you want it issued or not.
Uh-huh.
And we can hold harmless you if someone comes after you for that, and we can do that in the law here. I mean, this is stuff that you ought to be dealing with too. You know, Archie's probably telling you what in the hell you ought to be doing, and you don't need that.
Archie's done that a lot. He still is.
But when I do, I've become a kind of a self-appointed advocate for some of these things because I realize they're not getting done. And the very sophisticated people we supposedly have in our business, Pat Jasper, God bless her, she doesn't understand a thing about this.
Yeah.
Nor does any other. I used to not expect the academic folklorists to understand. I thought the public folklorists would.
Yeah.
But you know, they're out of that same pod. They're a little further toward the ground on the end of the pod, but they too are from the.
We both mentioned record companies. You've talked about your initiative getting these catalogs or archives, made in a sense public domain in a real sense.
We need a public domain listing there,
right.
too.
I'm wondering, do you feel, you've worked, I guess through the NCTA, you've worked with both the record companies we've mentioned and possibly others. You've put the Master Series in our Hooli, and the Rounders, I know, credit you with bringing, they said you introduced them to Ted Lundy and brought them pardon me?
A lot of
stuff. The Clint Riley and Fred Price records, they said, was yours. You've written a lot of liner notes, and yet when you read their catalogs, they'll exalt that stuff in their catalogs, and they'll talk about the deep flow tradition, blah 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 blah, and then you'll turn to another page in the same catalog, and that catalog will talk about the deep flow tradition that runs through, I don't know, some singer-songwriter they've got a new record out by, or some hybrid bluegrass star they've got a record by.
They're in the record business.
Do you ever worry that by putting some of the work that you like and admire in that company, getting it in the catalog, where everything kind of starts to blend together, that somehow is going to make a Ted Lundy look kind of just like that singer-songwriter, because it's all kind of in the same place and they use the same adjectives and adverbs to describe what they are? And does that concern you at all, or should it?
I don't think you can control that.
Okay.
I think that's beyond our reach.
Okay.
I haven't done much for Rounder and I've got a record coming out, the old Cowboy Tour.
Mm-hmm.
I look at a record company as a distribution mechanism.
Okay.
How many copies of something can they get? Can they get it into stores? Can they do what can they do?
Yeah.
And when I looked at that record and what could be done with it, I thought that they were probably the best, realizing that half of them would be sold at the Cowboy Poetry Gathering in Elko, Nevada,
Right.
by my friend Charlie Seaman and his shop there. When I did a record of Will Keyes a few years ago, I put it on County.
Okay.
Because that's the people who hold to the. You can buy a County record in the mountains.
Yeah.
You can't buy a Folkways one.
Right.
All kinds of things from Appalachia on the Folkways label, but you can't buy it there. There's not a rack anywhere up in between the north and the south end where you can buy a Folkways record.
Right.
It's like when I went to New York as a kid. I was up there working, and people were saying, "You're from Tennessee. You're a liberal kid. You've been out on the hustings. I've worked the civil rights years in Alabama and so forth." She said, "You must know a lot about the Highlander people." You know, I never heard of the Highlander people in Tennessee.
Right.
Well, and I read a lot. I learned about them in the East Village.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think they're wonderful people. But if you want to get a record sold in the Appalachian Mountains, put it on County. So, and there is no perfect record company. They're all flawed. And thank God the whole system's changing right now anyway.
How so?
Well, you know, the record's becoming obsolete.
Yeah.
The CD's becoming obsolete. It'll be coming off of the net.
Right.
It'll be coming. There's all kinds of things going on. That's an enormous flux. We do need more policy matters. See, there's the struggles over there are about people who own pieces of stuff, companies, that extension of the copyright law. There's nothing, a record made in 1920 now won't become public domain until 2067, and you and me have departed this vale of tears. I tell you, that's unfortunate. That's bad. And it happened because no one was really paying close, tight attention to it. And you had these people, ASCAP and BMI and so forth. They don't really so much represent songwriters as they do oligopies. The music publishing business is a gigantic oligopoly. And nobody takes care of public domain matters, those interest here. I was talking to the assistant librarian about this here the other day, and he and the music division head are very aware of this. They don't quite, they says, there's no one works on it. There's no constituency for it. I'd love to have more people work on it. I'll do my bit. I've made a little difference on some policy things, and I hope to make more. And I fully recognize that the Folk Alliance will never understand or relate to any of that. And the American Folklore Society won't either. I'll know. My friend George Holt, that you met there a few minutes ago, will know, and Charlie Seaman, Cowboy Poetry, will. And Peggy Bolger here at the library will, and Dan Sheehy. There'll be a handful of people, and Archie will to a degree that he can track it from where he's at. But if you do it hoping you get your name up in lights, that ain't going to happen. It has to be a little more internal. you have to be, you have to have the passion of the evangelist without his audience, without his choir, without his collection taker, without any of that.
I got another question, and in fairness, I want to tell you I've read some things you've said about this question I'm going to ask you, but what I've read is at least 15 years old now. So so it's this will be, maybe you'll say the same thing. I'm not going to tell you. Maybe you'll say something different. What do you say to people who say everything is hybridized now? Everything is affected by, God, if not traveling entertainers, if not the recording industry, if not radio, then, if not TV, everything, pure traditional streams such as exist in Joe Wilson's mind don't exist any longer. And people say that, I take it, and you've commented on it in the past. What do you say now?
Well, you probably read my Confessions of a Folklore.
I did, I've read that, yeah.
I wrote that in about a day and a half, or maybe less. But my mind hasn't changed much since that. And purity I'm not seeking. Purity, the last truly pure person was Queen Victoria's corset maker, and she's been gone for a while. But nevertheless, there are things that come from a little closer to the bone. Not everything. Superficial people will never understand depth. Mm-hmm. It's not in their making to understand depth. They're not going to go there. And I basically don't give a shit what they think. It's all right. They're not my self-image, my sense of worth, my getting up in the morning don't have a goddamn thing to do with their opinion, And I don't say that in any kind of anger. I say it, at one point it did matter a little bit, but it stopped, and as I said, whatever you are is okay. There seems to be a set of people in the world who are troubled by any lack of acceptance. And if you're trying to play traditional music and you're going in that direction, that you have to be born somewhere, or that there's a hurdle you can't get through. The religion of a lot of Americans is art.
Yeah.
And if they declare that their religion is you're supposed to have access to it. We live in a place where if you apply and you fill out the application correctly and so forth, you're eligible, and you keep applying and your term will come up. Well, to them I offer a sterling example. Michael Jordan. You can apply to the Bulls to play basketball. You can fill out all of the applications. You can practice the whole fucking goddamn quarter century of your first quarter century of life, and there stands Michael Jordan, and he's better. Now, I think those things exist in art just as well as they do in other things, and the key thing in music is instruments in tune or it's out of tune. You reach for the note and you hit it or you miss it, and the aesthetics of it work or they don't, and those are kind of immutable. And
but you want something more.
I want something more. I want it to come from a little closer to the heart. I want to I want to get, and yeah, DDT came down in all of the springs, including those way up the hollow. But I still I have a kind of almost a class-based way of looking at this. I believe in I'm a Democrat, small d, deep-dyed. I believe that the best art does emanate from the people. Take the sounds in this country, the blues. No one knows exactly when the blues, where they started. They're somewhere between the Carolina coast and Texas. We know roughly the period. It was around 1900. And there was this cry which comes from the heart of the people. And that's not folky romanticizing that says that. It was there, it's there. It's unmistakable. And there are other sounds like that. The tango, huayno, the music of the Peruvian Indians, the Andean Indians, that has that kind of that anguish to it too. Yeah, anybody buy himself a national steel guitar and get himself a slide, and he can go do that. But I'll probably be able to figure him out. Yeah, I'll probably know that he's not from where he thinks where he would like for me to think that he's from, and that's okay. You know, if he wants to select that thing to do, fine. But where do you go? What's the purpose of trying to become what you're not?
What you've described strikes me as so personal to you. Do you recognize that 99.99999% of the population is gonna miss the distinctions that you feel you can make in your heart and head? Or do you disagree with what I said? I mean,
I think that whether they articulate them or not, yeah, that they can figure some of that out.
Okay.
Whether they know they're doing it or not, they can.
Okay. But they'd need to know more than the sounds coming from the speaker, wouldn't they, usually? Do you think they'd need to know something about the life of the player, something about...
It's usually in the speaker, too.
Really? Is that what you'd say, and I don't mean to pick on this particular individual, but I think he's a good example. What would you say to a Jody Stecker, he's in my mind because he complained to me bitterly about some incident in his youth when he didn't get an NEA apprentice grant to go study with Dewey Balfa, and he said, shit, I picked up this stuff when I was 10 years old and I didn't know a revivalist from a traditionalist from a holler. I just loved it so much. It was from my heart. And then he added to me, and they gave the goddamn grant to Peter Schwartz, whose father, because he learned it from his father, who's a revivalist and not out of that tradition either. It seems that there are some kind of fanciful distinctions getting made.
I think he misread that one.
Okay.
I know Peter Schwartz, and I know Peter Schwartz's father and Dewey Balfa was a dear friend.
Okay.
And I think that what would have made the difference there was Dewey Balfa's wanting to work with Peter Schwartz and realizing that he was a special little kid.
Okay.
And whether he knew Jody or not, I think Jody's a wonderful musician and a good guy, as best I can tell. And he's, I have no problem with anything that he does or is. But on the other hand, he has entree to lots of things that the people whose music he plays never had, and I think it's good. I'm glad that he can do that. So I don't think he's been as discriminated against as they have.
Well, that's true. And I think he would agree with you. I think his gripe was not with Peter, but with the selection process that exalted Peter over him. And I don't think he did know that Dewey might have wanted to play with Peter. I'm sure he didn't.
Yeah, it's always, if you've served on grant panels do irrational things and they do insane things. And I've learned to never second guess a grants panel or why something wasn't done or how it was done.
Is there a lot of, in that world, in the granting panels of the NEA, and is there a lot of inconsistency and muddled definitions and scratching and clawing for the true path that gets misguided? Does that go on a lot?
I think that in the case of the Arts Endowment, that the professionals over there are very serious, conscientious people who try their goddamnedest to be utterly fair. And sometimes you can have an erratic panel. You've seen erratic juries, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah. And usually they're reasonably predictable if you do your work and it comes out the way it should. But it isn't a perfect system.
I've seen juries who, when I was astonished to learn, they didn't have the slightest idea what I was trying to tell them, and there's 12 of them and one of me. So who was wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I value people like Stecker, and I think of them as friends and colleagues. But I'm not working for them.
Okay.
I mean, they're not my cause. They don't need my hillbilly ass working for them. They have their own. Most of them have far more education than I do. They come from better families and went to better schools and all that. I stumble around and do my best, and if they don't like what I do, well, hell, go do it. It's easy enough to get into this game. It's it's a free country. You get up every morning and put on your pants. You can do whatever you want to between then and bedtime. You want to. If you don't like the way I do what I do, go into competition with me.
There's also, I don't want to forget, and I do want to be aware of your time, so interrupt me when you need to, but there's a whole plethora within this tradition industry that I speak of with a smile. There's a whole plethora of publications. The Old Time Herald, which I was reading in the room you found me in, and Bluegrass Unlimited, and Sing Out, with long heritages, and Bluegrass Unlimited will, they'll write about Bill Malone, and they'll write about Tony Trischka and his latest jazz fusion experimentations on the banjo, and they seem to want to take the position, well, it's all in the stream, and we're going to present it to everyone who can select what they need. Do those things, do they do more harm than good? Are they neutral? Are they positive?
They have a very different, you're talking about publications that have very different audiences.
Okay.
I would guess that most people who subscribe to Bluegrass Unlimited never heard of the Old Time Herald.
Okay.
I would bet that the subscription overlap wouldn't be over 2%.
Okay.
If it was that high.
Okay.
And the bluegrass crowd, they tend to be working class folks who have a passion for that sound, and Kuykendall and company cater to them and deal with them. I say, though, on the other hand, that Kuykendall does understand a lot of this with a depth and he came at it. He's from Indiana, but he grew up kind of here in Washington and in the early bluegrass scene and working with these hillbilly guys, and he was mesmerized by Monroe and Scruggs and these guys who are kind of giants of their world. If you took Bill Monroe, and if you'd taken Bill Monroe as alive and squeezed him hard enough in some kind of accelerator system, he was turned into music. It just popped out of him everywhere. He was maniacally musical, and I've always thought of Earl Scruggs. Earl Scruggs thinks of himself as an old-time musician. He knows that he made some changes and so forth, but he's the most humble man in his own assessment, and they made great changes in the world. But then so did our friend Balfa. Dewey was all heart, and he made a good contribution. And I don't belong to the Rescue the Perishing school of folklore. I don't think it's all about to die. I don't think that somebody's here preserving it. The fiddle and the banjo came together in the tidewater of Virginia in the early colonial period, sometime in the 1600s, and they've changed down through time. And if you want the root of the root of the root of anything in American music, it's likely to trail back to the tidewater and that collision between Africa and Europe and our culture, which you can also see in the Gulf, and you can see in the Southwest. It's the collision of Africa and Europe, and it's what makes our music different. It's what makes our culture different. I think even now we're still learning about it. We're learning how African we are, and that's good stuff to know. And I don't know that anybody's working on that a whole lot. Certainly not any of the publications we just mentioned. And I tend to read those, and occasionally I learn something from them. My expectation of them is not. It's hard to say it's not high. It's grown to be realistic, or I think it's realistic. They bring together a people who have a community of interest in that sound. Okay, all right. Record company kind of does the same kind of thing, but that doesn't really define what I do and what I want to work on and what matters a lot to me.
Well, then, go ahead.
And I think I bother people who look at the way I come at these things. Those who give a shit, and they could hold a convention around this little table. They just never met anybody like me, and I think what's different about me is I think a little bit about these things, and I also come from the head of the holler. And people who come from the head of the holler are not supposed to think about these things. And I don't say that in a self-deprecating or an arrogant way. It's just, that's the way that is.
Well, then we come to something I didn't want to do earlier. I said I'd let you do it. How would you define what you want to do? We've talked a little bit about record companies and publications. How do you differ? What do you want to do, in your words? People always ask me what I want to do in 2 sentences, and I say, oh, fuck you, so you can do that if you want to. But
I'd like to make it so that if little Juan out in East Overshoe, Texas, wants to get some of the recordings and some of the history of his people, and he can find himself to a little jackleg computer. He can download the Frontera collection. I want to make it so that people who come from Trade, Tennessee, the place where I come from, if they want to hear some of the older voices and some of the deeper things of their culture, they can get at them. It's not hard to do. I'm for opportunity. I've always been for equal opportunity. I went to Alabama in the 60s and worked on some stuff down there because I thought that it was important to be there at that time. And I think that working on policy things now is important. I think that music, the interest of the citizens, of people, a greater number of people are not being taken care of in this. I'm fortunate in that I can make a living doing things, and nobody pays me to do this. It's just that my board and my staff and my buddies put up with me being the way that I am.
Right.
And they kind of understand, and the chairman of my board is the Undersecretary of State of the United States, and he's a wise and good guy, you know, and he thinks it's kind of fun too.
Who reads the Old Time Herald, by the way? He told me he had a few words to say about the readership of Bluegrass Unlimited. I'm wondering how you'd distinguish those readerships, since he said they were distinct.
They're urban people, for the most part, who got caught by the sound, those sounds of the old-time revival when the music went from the Kingston Trio to the New Lost City Ramblers. But it's kind of lodged there too. One of the things that I've noticed is that people's ears are open from the time they're about 3 years old to about age 21, sometimes a little less. And if they listen to big band music in their early teens, it's big band for the rest of their life. If they listen to whatever they listen to, that's what they'll follow. If you go to the Peter, Paul, and Mary concerts around the country, they all sit, all those folks, you know, God bless them. They're some of the nicest people in the world. But, and I think the old-time Herald people are people who got caught in the folky revival. They're the folklorists who pick well. I've never met one of them that I really disliked. I think they're really good people, but they don't sail my ship. You understand? I sail my goddamn ship.
So is revivalist a pejorative? Do you hear revivalist and cringe like you do? And do you hear folklorist and cringe?
No. I think revivalist is sometimes misused. I think a lot of things